Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, Corbin and I discuss what needs to change or not change in our exercise as we age, and when we should start exercising to, age well.
Hey, so I was watching The Last Dance, that Michael Jordan movie on Netflix, and at one point they were interviewing his trainer, and his trainer was talking to him when he went from his 20s into his 30s on how they have to change his entire workout routine. You know, he's getting older, they're going to have to do things with a lot less impact. And I started thinking, what a great subject for our podcast for those individuals that are going to be aging. As you know, we're doing a podcast on aging well. What about that demographics that's in their 40s, 50s, and 60s? Do they really need to change up their workout routines?
Well, really, it depends on who they are and what they've been doing. Other than that, I mean, training is training. If you're an elite athlete, maybe. If you are a power lifter, Olympic lifter, you're probably going to have to change up your training a little bit because your body just can't continue to keep progressing those heavy loads and that heavy intensity. But if you're the average Joe going to the gym, you don't train any different, in my opinion, from what you were in your 20s to what you were in your 40s.
Now, we've talked on this podcast about 5x5 programs or, your... what did we call it? The Elite 7, where you're doing the push, the overhead press, the pulling motion, a row.
Those are just your basic movement patterns. Yeah.
Right.
So you have the squat, the hinge, the vertical push and pull, and the horizontal push and pull, and then loaded carries.
So it seems like anyone that's really trying to turn back the time of aging should really just focus on those main things, correct?
Yeah, and I wouldn't address it as turning back the time of aging. I think we just want to kind of slow the clock. You're not going to turn back the clock of aging. I mean, if you let your body go to pot because you're not training hard enough, you're not going to regain that as you age. And so you're basically just picking up where you are now. And again, the goal for successful aging, for aging well, is to have the process in place early on and maintain it through much more of your life.
And ideally, individuals should be doing more resistance style training. I know we have mentioned that, like, it's a lot easier to maintain cardio, but resistance seems to be kind of the better way to go. I know all exercise is going to be good in order to benefit someone's health, but according to the National Library of Medicine, the World Health Organization has 3 categories of populations that can be distinguished: young, old, which is 65 to 74, middle-aged, which is 75 to 84, and the oldest demographic, which is 85 plus. And generally, in these categories, with aging, it leads to an overall loss of tissue vitality through a myriad of signaling mechanisms. And in that research, the best way to combat that was essentially resistance training. Well, what would your take on that be?
I think we've said that all along. I think, first of all, we have to consider all of the health-related components of physical fitness, cardiorespiratory, muscle endurance, muscle strength, body composition, and flexibility, as well as the neuromotor components of physical fitness. So the neuromotor skill-related, your speed, power, balance, agility, coordination, and reaction time. All of those are important. The key is, where are you deficient in? And that's what you need to be focusing on. And we need to balance those as we age. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to think once they hit a certain age, they shouldn't be lifting weights anymore, that they should be focusing in on heart health. And what happens with that approach, and that's been an approach, I think, in exercise science for many decades, is that we have focused on cardiovascular health and neglected musculoskeletal health. And as a result, people lose muscle mass. And, we blame it on aging. We say, well, age, you're going to lose, 10% of your muscle mass from the age of 25 to 50. And from 50 to 80, you're going to lose another 40%. But that's because we become increasingly less active as we age, and we're not using those muscles. You don't use it, you lose it. And so for somebody who is aging and they focus on cardio, well, you're doing your cardio, but you're losing muscle mass. You can't do as much cardio. Your cardio is not going to be able to keep up. And so you do less cardio, you lose more muscle mass, and you get this progressive sarcopenia, this loss of muscle mass as you age, and you just eventually become frail. Even though you've been active your whole life and you're in your 80s, and now your idea of doing cardio is a slow walk, around a neighborhood. And that's not really cardio, that's just physical activity. Whereas if we can focus in on maintaining and ideally building muscle mass, because most of us are not as muscled as we could be. I mean, there's very few, other than, the most athletic population, that we could say, okay, you just need to maintain your muscle mass as you age. You have some subset of that athletic population that is extremely muscled, and it's like it's not practical to maintain that level of muscle mass, but decrease the muscle mass to a sustainable, appropriate level and maintain that through your life. But if we can build or maintain our muscle mass, we can do more physical activity. We can keep the heart rate up. We can keep stroke volume up. We can maintain AVO2 difference, and we maintain that cardiovascular health, and we can continue to do more.
And it kind of goes hand in glove with that old saying, like, the more you work out, the more energetic that you're going to feel, correct? Like, the more energy, the more vitality you're going to feel. You're just going to feel more youthful.
I think that's limited. I mean, it depends how you work out. Just simply saying work out more is not necessarily the best approach. It's work out more smartly than it is just simply work out more. Because a lot of people think, just go to the gym more, and they do the same shit over and over again in the gym. They're not progressing. They do more of it, and eventually they're doing too much of nothing, and their body's not adapting to it, but it's too much load and stress on their body, and it starts to diminish their performance.
So do you think if you're working out smart and you're combining a good regimen of resistance training, and I realize that you're not an endocrinologist, but do you think it has to do with the balancing act of the hormones within the body? I know there's a lot of research out there that indicate that older men do respond with an enhanced hormone profile in early phases of resistance training, but there's not that much of a difference in response with younger men. Do you think that balancing act of having those hormones with the resistance training kind of gives you that sense of not feeling as stressed, feeling more youthful, feeling more regenerated throughout your life?
I'm not exactly following what you're asking there.
So a lot of people, they work out to lose weight, but a lot of individuals, they work out just to keep that happy, healthy lifestyle, correct? And those individuals that have that happy, healthy lifestyle, they tend to be a little bit more energetic, right? They're go-getters. They got that internal drive, a little bit more competitive. Even people who used to go to the gym on a regular basis and then kind of slowly stopped, they've recognized that their energy levels tend to be lower when they're not as active.
Okay. Connect that with the hormones then.
Okay. Do you think in the world that we live in, with how much stress that's going on, obviously cortisol is a stress hormone. Do you think that there is a way to combat that with resistance training by spiking testosterone levels or just all levels throughout the body in order to kind of balance out that endocrine system to allow us to kind of have a good, peaceful mindset, be more energetic, be more of a go-getter, have that competitive spirit?
I think you're kind of mixing a lot of both endocrinology and just psychology in all that, because there's certain psychological components that go along with the exercise, and maybe that's the endorphin release and things like that, some of the neurotransmitters. But a lot of that is just feeling better about yourself. You have more energy because you are lower body weight, and you have more cardiovascular health. You have better muscle strength and muscle endurance. With the hormones, I think we focus way too much on hormones. Exercise is going to tend to balance out our hormones. We know that with any exercise, with exercise training, the necessary hormonal response for any stimulus is going to be much lower, which allows us a greater stimulus response or ability to respond to a greater stimulus. And so, like, for example, epinephrine, norepinephrine, the like adrenaline type hormones that prepare us for physical activity. If we keep those elevated, we need an elevated response, and we don't have as much room if there's a suddenly greater response to or demand to the activity. And so as we exercise, that the amount that is released in order to meet that certain stimulus is much lower. We can up that if there's a greater stressor. So if you feel threatened, you're going to get that fight or flight response. You're going to have a smaller hormonal response to that, so that if you do turn around and it is a fight situation, you can elevate that response even higher and not have a heart attack and die on the spot. We talk a lot about testosterone. I think males tend to get a little bit overly focused on their testosterone levels and stuff like that. Exercise is going to help to maintain those levels a little bit more. A combination of exercise and hormonal therapy may be necessary for aging men, but that's only if your testosterone levels are really subnormal. And people should have their hormonal levels checked. I think there's an immediate assumption that I hit 40, I got to start taking, testosterone therapy or something like that. And I think that's a bit of BS. I think you're better off just utilizing the muscle and, stimulating, your natural hormonal levels. Activity is going to elevate that somewhat. Too much exercise is going to diminish your testosterone levels. So doing a moderate amount of exercise is really all we need to be focused on.
So what would you say to someone who wants to make that lifestyle change, that they're in their middle age, in between their 40s or 50s, or even maybe they're about to retire and they're in their 60s and they're like, you know what, I've dedicated way too much of my life towards work, or, I'm at a good phase where I'm pretty good in my career, but my kids have moved on and they're out in college and I want to start focusing on myself, but I just don't have the motivation for. What would you give someone advice to get up and just kind of focus on this new lifestyle of resistance training?
Well, they've got to find their own motivation. There's nothing I can say that's going to motivate somebody. You go through the stages of change. You have pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and then on into maintenance. If they're thinking that, then they're in the contemplation stage. Best you can do is kind of support that and say, well, this is going to be the benefits of exercise, but it's ultimately their choice. There's not much you can do with anybody to motivate them to exercise. Heck, even teenagers, as a parent, you can't, especially in this generation now, where you're considered neglectful if you push them out the door and lock it behind them and tell them they can't come back until dinner time. But the motivation's got to come from within. The best we can do as exercise scientists is give them the necessary tools, should that motivation arise, to be able to do the exercises, to do what they need to do to improve, help them set goals, help them come out with a plan for those goals, and lead them forward. But again, it's got to come from within.
Right, but you're not going to deal with anyone who's Jack LaLanne, just has that natural.
You're on a Jack LaLanne kick.
I could say Tony Horton. I can name a few other ones, but
Donut King.
Yeah. But sometimes it takes an external source to push an individual to drive. Yes, it does come from within, and yes, that individual does have to make that final decision. But what is that final decision? What would you question them? Do you want to live longer? Do you want to add more years onto your life? Do you want to be able to keep up with your grandkids? Like, what would be the kickstarter to have that person kind of change their mindset?
Again, it's going to be individualized. So you got to help them find what is their motivation. And it is, you had exercise motivation and adherence with me, and we talked about motivational interviewing. It's just the way you address the questions to that individual to get them to identify what is their most important, what is their why to exercising. And until they find a why, focusing on the what's not going to really help, because the why has to lead to, okay, well then how? And then this is what you do in order to do what you need to do. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
All right. So why would it be important for an individual in their 40s, in their 50s to continuously train with resistance training?
Okay. Well, I feel like I addressed that already, that, your functionality, your performance is going to be better if we maintain a level. And I don't like putting an age piece on it, because it's like I see all these things in the media. It's like, and I just saw one today about it was like a list of, I don't know how many different things that men over 40 should be doing. And about a third of the list was all testosterone related. And it's like, what a bunch of BS. You hit a certain age, you don't suddenly, your lifestyle needs don't change. It's all just a marker. It's just, it's a rough estimate, and not all 40-year-olds are the same biologically. There are a lot of 40-year-olds that are much more like a 50, 60-year-old, and there are a lot of 40-year-olds that are much more like a 20-year-old, and there are a lot of 20-year-olds that are like 40-year-olds now. We start talking about what you have to do at 40, 50, 60. With the current generation, I'd say if we're having them wait until they're 40, 50, 60 in order to make some of these lifestyle decisions, they ain't going to make it, because they're already living the lifestyle, very sedentary lifestyle. Remember, less than 23% of the U.S. population meets the minimum activity guidelines. So we have a huge part of the population that's not doing anything. It's not a switch that gets turned on at a specific decade. And so my recommendation is anybody, I don't care what your age is, just start doing stuff now. And the longer you persist in doing that, the better you're going to age. The better longevity you're going to have. So changing your diet. If your diet's bad right now, change it now. Don't wait till you're 40, 50, 60. If you are inactive, start increasing your activity level. If you are cardiovascularly fit, but you've neglected your strength training, and you see this a lot with distance runners, because it's very difficult and almost contrary to their performance to do too much resistance training while they're competing. But at some point, as they stop competing, they have to start focusing in on building some muscle mass, because if you have a very slight build, because you're a distance runner, you have very little muscle mass to lose as you age. It's the same with bone mineral density in women. The more bone mineral density you build up in your young years, the more you have to lose as you age. And so for women and bone mineral density, you got to start doing weight-bearing exercise before your first period. And before really adolescence, we need to get women and any individual active so they're building up their bones, building up their strength, their coordination, and all the different aspects of the neuromotor end, so that technique-wise and things like that, they can begin to build better on that in terms of the cardiorespiratory, muscle endurance, muscle strength, and so on. And, so there's no age limit to any of this. I think it's a matter of where are you right now? What do you need to do going forward in order to age successfully? And that's going to be different for everybody. But if you're not lifting weights, you don't have to suddenly, start doing powerlifting, go get yourself a weight belt and start lifting heavy barbells. But you need to be doing some kind of resistance training so that the muscle is being overloaded, stressed to a level greater than what it's accustomed to, so that it can adapt. And, you may not get as much growth the older you get, but who really cares? You're really that interested in your 40s, 50s, and 60s becoming a, power lifter, bodybuilder, or whatever? No, you're more interested in just having a greater functionality and a more active lifestyle. And so, you're going to train maybe a little less aggressively than you would. And I get troubled by a lot of trainers that, have people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are just, general beginning exercisers, that they're training them like athletes. And we should never be saying train like an athlete, because athletes train really extreme levels to be able to perform, and they beat the crap out of their bodies. There is not a single high-level athlete that at the end of their career is not feeling the stress and strains of that athletic competition. So they don't want to continue that. But they have built up probably a great amount of maybe muscle strength in a certain area or cardiorespiratory, but they've neglected the other areas because sports are very specific. And so we start looking at what are the things that we need to do to balance out our overall health and fitness and continue to progress as much as we can. Progression might not be tremendous. You're not going to, suddenly go from never benching at all to a 500-pound bench when you're in your 50s. It's possible, very unlikely. And if it is possible, then you missed decades of opportunity to be competitive and to have done other things. But, for somebody who is of reasonable enough health that they can start exercising, just starting to put resistance against the muscle is going to benefit them going forward. And the key is you got to keep doing a little bit more. You got to keep doing a little bit more. And it might be more volume. It might be more intensity. It might be more frequency. It might be changing up some of the variety, maybe becoming a little bit more technical in the lifts, going to a point where, maybe you start training on machines because, for an older population, that gives them a little bit better stability, gives them a little bit more safety in doing the exercises. But as they build up enough strength that they can function and move through those, 7 basic movement patterns, then they can start loading them in ways that are going to challenge their stability, their coordination, range of motion, balance, and all those types of things.
Well, you bring up a really good concept about the fact that the world that we're living in, there does need to be a change that needs to happen. And it's really funny. There's a ton of research out there, or a ton of studies that are done, and it just primarily focuses on that middle-aged group, individuals that are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. with your PhD of exercise physiology and teaching courses on a collegiate level, you're seeing a lot of individuals that are in their young 20s. So you're seeing it firsthand, kind of the decline of our society's fitness. Am I kind of picking that up? Like you to say, hey, it's really important to start working here. And in our world today, like individuals that are younger are living a more sedentary lifestyle.
I see it on the periphery because remember, I teach exercise science. So my students tend to be a little bit more active and in a little bit better shape than the majority of campus. But I walk across campus and I see, people who have, greater amount of, obesity. And, I think that idea of the freshman 15 doesn't even exist anymore because most kids are coming into college already overweight from, junior high and high school. And they're already eating crappy food. So the diet's not really changing so much going to, a lousy college dorm food kind of diet. But, I see it more around me in society. And I'm lucky to kind of be working with the younger population and, hopefully guiding them to be wanting to work with individuals to kind of change this trend. But, I don't see it in my own classes. I see it in the periphery.
Would you see it to be more of like a societal thing, a cultural thing, or just a mental mindset of I just don't have that desire to kind of work out or physically move? I'm just interested just for talking purposes.
Yeah, that's getting in the heads of a lot of people. I'd say probably all of the above. I can't speak for the bulk of the Americans that are inactive. We have excuses all the time. We've always had excuses for not exercising. Time being the biggest, but time is the biggest BS excuse that anybody has for not exercising because it doesn't take as much time. If anything, we have learned more in most recent decades that how more efficiently we can actually do things like, especially cardio. I mean, cardio doesn't take much more than, maybe even 15 minutes of reasonably intensive interval work a day or even a few days a week to at least maintain. Strength training, it really doesn't take that much if your goals are not bodybuilding or, powerlifting, or you're not training for athletic competition. If you're just training for general health to improve your strength and your physique somewhat and improve your overall health, it doesn't take much. Really 30 minutes a day of reasonable weight training can have tremendous results.
Well, another thing that you had mentioned, which I find really interesting, is, the younger, like getting kids to start resistance training or getting them involved in a sport. I could not agree more. I'm a huge advocate for sports. I think sports build character. I think it provides an individual with discipline. And not only that, but like the physical aspect of sports. And it's really cool because you're right. It does create more kind of a base of that muscular strength or that bone density with the minerals. Yeah, it's really funny because I recently just saw a news article on one of our local news channels, and it was a group of moms that were coming together and trying to prevent at an elementary school level and middle school level the act of like team sports. They were trying to eliminate that. And I don't know, that just didn't settle really well for me. And I think there's more to being involved in a team sport, right? It's you start with that base and having that, not only the exercise, but creating those camaraderies, those team relationships. It preps you for the real world. And then on the physical realm, it kind of gets you into a little bit of a base or a preparation for when you do hit middle age, right? And you do have, you kind of know what to do Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like you kind of know, I know how to lift, or, you know,
well,
I have a
just
good...
because you're in team sports does not mean...
Right, I gotcha.
Because the majority of your coaches that are working in these programs don't know what they're doing. And, you know, it's important that, you know, I'd make a plug for, you know, the sports performance facilities that are around, and, you know, hiring qualified strength and conditioning coaches for these programs, and people who are focused not on developing or not winning championships, but rather on developing athletes or developing individuals for lifetime of physical activity and fitness. Because a lot of these kids are not going to really do much beyond, you know, elementary school, middle school sports, maybe on into high school sports. But that foundation that they get from the team building, being involved in a sport, developing motor skills, those are all extremely important. And, you know, when coaches are more focused on winning, we get kids who get frustrated and end up quitting. On the other end of that, you know, we have, you know, parents that are pushing more, everybody gets a trophy and all the other nonsense, that kids don't develop a desire to better themselves, because what's the point in bettering yourself if mediocre is going to get you a trophy, right? There's
right.
not a desire to work harder, or to, you know, be a part of a team. It's just be on a team. And, you know, so there's a lot of complexity to youth sports and what we can do better as we kind of move the kids through. I think, you know, there should be a much better emphasis on developing neuromotor skills and developing, you know, health-related components of physical fitness very early on. And I'm not, you know, so much in favor of, you know, early weight training for kids, but learning the basic techniques for lifting. Too often I see, you know, parents on social media that are posting pictures of their son's PR, you know, doing the squat, and it's the shittiest form I've ever seen in a squat. And it's like, that's not a squat, and their coach should not be allowing that, because, you know, yeah, you might be able to tell recruiters my kid's got a 350-pound squat or something like that, but if it's a crappy squat, they're not really as strong as you think they are. The strength coach, when they go to that college, is going to have to retrain everything, which means they're going to be behind the eight ball in terms of progressing when their body's mature enough to really develop. And they're likely to get hurt in that process too. So you get a kid that might not even make it to college sports because they're training so poorly that they injure themselves. So I think, you know, focus on technique. Whenever you're a beginner, the first thing that you should be doing is mastering the movement pattern. Once you master those, you know, basic movements, you know, again, the squat, the hinge, the horizontal push, horizontal pull, overhead pull, or vertical pull, vertical push, and, you know, having a capacity to carry things. And, you know, there's plenty of opportunities for us to do carries, you know, carrying the groceries out of the car, or, you know, maybe walk to the grocery store and actually walk back with your bags. And, you know, even just doing things around the house where we're carrying things in each hand, or unbalanced loads and all those types of things. Those are building the basic foundation to be able to build off of those. And so whether you are in your preteen years or you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, those are the things that you should be focused on. And if you start late, then you just have to start at that same point and work from there. I mean, I've had a client a number of years ago who came to me after reading the Tufts study that looked at training in nursing home patients. And they found that, I think it was only like a 6-week training program or something like that. It's been almost 30 years for that since that study was done. But they found that the resistance training actually enabled those seniors to rely less on their assisted devices, their canes and walkers and those things. And this guy came in and, He was 84 years old, walked with a cane, had a very short, shuffly kind of stride, moved very slowly. I mean, it was an adjustment for me as a trainer to have to slow my pace down in the weight room so that I wasn't leaving him in dust behind me. But, over a very short period of time, he started carrying his cane. He started walking a bit faster. He was getting stronger. And, it could start at any age, but you got to start. Okay, well, where do we start with this individual at this point? You got to start somewhere.
And it's a process too. You can't just start and then expect results, right? You got to start and just be like, all right, I'm starting a journey, right? I'm starting an expedition, depending on what phase of life that you're in.
Well, it's a journey expedition no matter what phase.
That's true. Some people might have a little bit more of a straight and narrow path, and others might have a whole bunch of obstacles in their way, though.
I know nobody who has a straight and narrow path. There's always obstacles. There's always hiccups. There's always setbacks. But that's part of the journey. That's what makes us grow. Not only, stronger physically, but emotionally, socially, spiritually, intellectually, everything.
Hear that, guys? If you have the DOMS effect, the delayed onset of muscle soreness, do not give up. Just remember, it's part of the process. It's part of the journey.
Well, DOMS doesn't have to be part of the journey. It's inevitable if you're training hard. And for any listeners that don't know what DOMS is, that's delayed onset muscle soreness. That's the soreness that we feel generally about 2 to 3 days after doing a kind of a novel, new exercise or an exercise we haven't done for a while that has a pretty large eccentric component to it, lowering component. So something like a squat or a lunge can often leave you suddenly feeling like somebody's shoving knitting needles or something pins into your hamstrings after a couple of days after you've done the exercise. That's completely normal. It's a immune system response. It can only be treated by doing more activity. And so no amount of ice, ibuprofen, rest, or anything is really going to effectively remove that. We just need to just keep moving. You might not be able to move quite as effectively in the next workout because you overdid it a little bit in that previous workout. But you do something, you're going to recover faster and you'll grow from it. You'll get stronger and you do it again.
All right. So in an overall of this podcast, what did we cover? It doesn't matter if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or even in your 20s. If you want to start living a healthier lifestyle, then by all means, get active and start doing it. Don't let anything come in your way. Just remember, it's a part of a journey. It's a goal. For those parents that are listening, sports are actually a really good thing. It creates a good base foundation as far as having the exercise, but it also triggers kind of a mental awareness of, I'm not just given stuff. I need to earn it. And it's just part of this journey of life that we're all going through, and we're all aging, and hopefully together we're all aging well.
Yes, hopefully we're aging well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.